My name is Chaim Michael and I will deliver this session. The purpose would be providing you with the insight that will allow you to make the proper decision about moving forward to Scala or Kotlin. Let's start with the question, why? Why should we want to move forward beyond Java? Well, Java with us for 30 years already, and it did great. But when comparing Java with other programming languages, those new ones, such as Swift, Kotlin, Scala, even C#, then we see that there are lots of missing features and capabilities. This was one of the main reasons for moving forward to Scala or Kotlin or maybe other programming languages. Scala is a high-level, statically typed, multi-paradigm programming language that was developed by Professor Martin Goderski from EPFL in Switzerland. The first version of Scala was released in 2003. The code we write in Scala can be compiled into Java bytecode, which makes it very simple taking code in Scala, code in Java, and put the two together. Based on my experience, usually it works great. You can code something in Scala and then use a library that was developed in Java, or do the opposite. Develop a program in Java and then use something, a library that was developed in Scala. By the way, the same capability also exists with Kotlin. When coding in Kotlin, we can transpile the code to Java bytecode, similarly to Scala. This is a code sample, just that you get the feeling of how code in Scala looks like. So the source code, we save it in a file with the Scala extension. In this code sample, you can see that we can define an object. Instead of using the class keyword, we use object, and by doing so, we create a new type, but it is a type that we cannot instantiate. It is a type that is immediately instantiated, and in this code sample, for instance, if I write calculation, then I get the reference for the object, the one and only object that was automatically instantiated from the calculation type. By the way, in Kotlin, we can do the same. The two programming languages are very similar. You can also pay attention to the fact that the type of the parameter we specify it on the right, just as with Kotlin, TypeScript, Swift, and a few other programming languages. Now, what about Kotlin? Kotlin was developed by JetBrains. The first version was officially released in 2011. Both Kotlin and Scala, those two programming languages, are very similar, and the two of them support both OOP and functional programming. Now, the reason for the popularity that Kotlin gained was the shift from Java to Kotlin when it comes to native application development for the Android platform. At some point, Google announced that Kotlin, it is the preferred language for developing native application for Android. However, based on my experience during the last years, most of the courses that I deliver for Kotlin, in most of them, most of the students are Java developers that want to move forward and learn Kotlin, Java developers that develop server-side applications, not native applications for the Android platform. So even though it might feel that Kotlin belongs to the mobile applications domain, the reality is different. We use Kotlin all over, and especially on the server side. Now, both Kotlin and Scala, as we said, we can transpile the code or compile the code into Java bytecode. So it is very simple. It is straightforward to write something in Kotlin and then use a library that was developed in Java, or do something else, code something in Java and use a library that was developed in Kotlin. In most cases, it works straightforward without any difficulties. Here is a code sample for Kotlin. Here you can also see that the type of the parameter is on the right. Both Kotlin and Scala use val and var for creating new variables. Val is a variable that is actually final. You cannot change the value. Var is a variable you can change its value. It is the same in Kotlin and Scala. Here in this code sample, you can see creating a list, numbers1, the variable numbers1, all the reference for a list object, and then in line 8 we call the filter function. And what you see to the right, it is actually a lambda expression. It is a unique syntax that is available for Kotlin developers. Okay, so we saw a code sample for Kotlin, a code sample for Scala. The two are very similar. If you learn the two, and I can say that based on my experience, you will find that it is fairly simple moving from Scala to Kotlin or from Kotlin to Scala. However, I can share with you, based on my experience, that when teaching Kotlin, I had the feeling that it is a bit simpler comparing with teaching Scala. And I mean simpler for the students. We'll talk about that later. The two languages are so similar that you can find in both of them the possibility to work with objects. Both of them do not support static fields and static methods. Actually, when I learned Kotlin, I got the feeling that those that developed Kotlin got lots of inspiration from Scala, and in many cases they introduced small improvements to the way Scala works. I teach Scala since 2009. I teach Kotlin since 2014-15, and I taught so many courses that it is absolutely clear that Kotlin has a simpler learning curve, and it is so clear that both programming languages share a lot. So when talking about capabilities that both programming languages support, we can mention pattern matching. We can talk about the primary constructor, that its definition is bundled together with the definition of the class. Extension functions, you can find it both in Kotlin and in Scala. If you are familiar with C#, C# also supports extension functions. Working with objects. Properties, we don't have it in Java. My feeling that this is one of the main features that I miss in Java. This is my feeling. And you can work with property both in Kotlin and in Scala. By the way, in Kotlin, when you define a class and variables in that class, those variables actually are not variables. They are automatically properties. Both programming languages support lambda expressions. Both programming languages support the use of libraries and classes in Java, and so on. Now, we already talked about that. It is very simple to mix Java with Kotlin or Java with Scala in both directions. And based on my experience, it works very well. Now, what about IDE? Well, I strongly recommend to use IntelliJ because the support for Kotlin and Scala is out of the box. When it comes to Scala, just install the Scala plugin. When it comes to Kotlin, everything is already there because Kotlin was developed by JetBrains, and it is their interest to make it simple for everyone to use Kotlin. So it is smooth and straightforward using the IntelliJ IDE in both programming languages. Just install that IDE, and the community version, which is free, is enough, sufficient, and start using it. Coding either in Scala or Kotlin, it is very simple. Now let's try to compare a bit the two programming languages with each other and with Java. When it comes to community, no doubt the community around Java is bigger, much bigger compared with the communities we have with Kotlin and Scala. When it comes to popularity, and you can check the index at tiobe.com, Java is by far more popular. After Java, we have Kotlin, and then we have Scala. It is interesting that we have Scala for so many years, and Kotlin came only 10 years, even more, after Scala was released, and still Kotlin is more popular than Scala. I think it is mainly due to the fact that Kotlin is simpler, its learning curve is simpler. This is the main reason, in my opinion. Now, what about working with big data and coroutines? Well, when it comes to big data, and especially frameworks such as Spark, Apache Spark, so there is a version for Kotlin, but it's not maintained and popular as the one for Scala. Spark was developed in Scala. The community around Spark, usually most code samples, the books you find usually will use Scala, not Kotlin, and not Java. So when it comes to big data, if this is an important factor, then most likely that Scala will provide you with a better solution compared with Kotlin. Now, about coroutines. Well, Kotlin has an amazing library that supports coroutines in an amazing way, more than any other library in any other programming language. And by doing so, you will find that the use of coroutines on the server side is very popular. So we have that in Kotlin. We don't have it in Scala and Java. Scala and Java, well, you can find solution for working with coroutines, but it will never be similar to what we have in Kotlin. So Kotlin supports coroutines by far more than Scala and Java. Now, what about the learning curve? So Java is the simpler. Learning Java is simpler compared with learning Kotlin and Scala. After Java comes Kotlin, and after Kotlin we have Scala. Scala is a bit more difficult to learn compared with Kotlin. I think that if you compare the topics you need to go over, you have more topics to go over when learning Scala. Now, about the ease of development, well, we can say that the development cycle is very similar. Java, Kotlin, Scala, pretty much the same. We use IntelliJ IDE. Usually it works great, so the ease of development is quite good in all three. Now, what about first-class functions? Well, even though you will find that the official documentation of Kotlin claims that Kotlin supports first-class functions, it is not accurate. The support is very similar to what we have in Java. However, in Scala, this is a different story. In Scala, when you define a function, it is very similar to JavaScript. You can take the name of that function and just use it as a variable that holds the reference to the object that represents the function, exactly as it happens in JavaScript. So Scala truly supports first-class functions. Every function is actually an object. You can pass over its reference as an argument when calling an IO order function. When dealing with Java and Kotlin, yeah, you can define a lambda expression, and the value of that lambda expression is a reference for an object that you can imagine as an object that represents a function, but it is kind of small trick, we can say. Very similar to the trick that happens in C# if you are familiar with delegates. It's not as in Scala. In Scala, a function is an object. In Kotlin and Java, it's not exactly first-class functions. Now, what about null safety mechanism? Well, in Kotlin, we don't have null. The only way to work with null is if you change the type into a nullable one. When doing so, only then a variable of that type, it would be possible to assign null to that variable. We do so when working with libraries in Java, because in Java we use the null value, so we cannot escape that null. But if you write an application 100% Kotlin, then you don't have null. And thanks to that, we have less bugs, less cases such as null pointer exception. Java and Scala support null. They didn't evolve as Kotlin. They still work with null. Now, what about the support for server-side development? Well, all three, Kotlin, Java, and Scala, they are very popular on the server side. I know lots of companies that use Kotlin on the server side. I also know companies that use Scala. But when thinking about companies that made the change and move from Java to Kotlin, in most cases, they move to Kotlin, not to Scala. Kotlin is newer compared with Scala. And when thinking about companies that do use Scala, then in many cases it is because they started using Scala long before Kotlin was released, was in the market. And another reason is that the need for the support for big data, the need to use frameworks such as Spark that led them to using Scala. Now, what about developing applications for mobile telephones? So Scala is not for mobile telephones. Well, if you find an article showing how to develop an application in Scala for Android, it is just for the buzz. Don't do it. Java and Kotlin, on the other hand, are very popular, especially when dealing with Android application development, but not only. Kotlin, of course, is more popular because we have a move from Java to Kotlin when it comes to native applications development for Android. But Kotlin also has something else. Kotlin has a version known as Kotlin multi-platform. You code once, and that code is compiled into code specifically for iOS and specifically for Android, so you can have one code base for the two platforms. JetBrains try to push it very hard. If you ask my opinion, well, the reality is that when it comes to mobile application development, developing a native application in many cases is a poor decision. In most cases, there are alternatives for developing the application. You don't need to develop a native application. You can use React Native, you can use Dart and Flutter. You can develop an hybrid application. So when looking at mobile applications development, native application development using Kotlin is not popular in any case. So usually companies prefer the other alternatives. So I don't recommend learning Kotlin in order to developing applications for mobile telephone as a career. The need for that for specific applications where you don't have a choice and you must develop the application as a native application, I can understand. In those companies, they won't have an alternative and they will develop using Kotlin. But as a career decision for a software developer, I don't think it is a good decision. Learning Kotlin in order to learn mobile applications, mobile native application development, it doesn't seem as a safe path when thinking about all the alternatives. And I see a huge risk in taking such a decision. Now, what about the support for functional programming? So thanks to the fact that in Scala every function is an object, the support for functional programming is bigger compared with Kotlin and Java. About OOP, then all three have a similar support. However, due to the fact that Scala and Kotlin allows us to work with properties, and when using Kotlin, you don't have a choice, it is always properties. Due to the fact that when using Scala and Kotlin, we don't have static variables, we don't have static methods. The alternative is defining an object, and in that object defining methods, for instance, and then using them as if they were static methods. It feels that way. Bottom line, the support for OOP when using Kotlin and Scala is stronger compared with the support for OOP when using Java. Scala and Kotlin, we can summarize and say they are more OOP by far compared with Java. So let's try to summarize. So both Scala and Kotlin are very similar. Moving from Kotlin to Scala or from Scala to Kotlin is very simple. So you develop in Java, or your company use Java, and you have the dilemma whether to move forward with Scala or Kotlin. So if working with big data, working with Spark, Apache Spark is a factor, then probably you should move forward with Scala. In all other cases, I think it would be a better decision to move forward with Kotlin. Simpler to learn, excellent support for coroutines, which is very popular on the server side, and all other reasons we mentioned. So thanks for attending my talk. Please feel free asking questions, and I will do my best providing you with the answers you're looking for.